I personally will miss Alison Redford's voice at the table. I hope that it's not the case that there was a gender issue in terms of the decision that she made. I hope that's not the case. Would it be a shock to me if there were some part of the decision that had to do with her being a woman? It wouldn't be a shock to me, but I really hope that that's not the case.
Gender bias taking down the Premier of Alberta. Bad ideas sometimes just won't die. We first started talking about this a week and a half, 2 weeks ago almost, after Karen Klassen put out an article, a column in the Calgary Herald. Well, she's got another one out, again claiming gender bias. She says, despite the hissing, gender bias is always in action, conscious or not. Society has a complicated relationship with women, which can be summed up as, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. Discrimination is implicit. Really. I want to bring in Faith Goldy for further conversation on this. Faith, I have talked to several women about this issue. Not one that I know has said that there's any legitimacy to the idea that a female premier facing off against a female opposition leader that had a woman leave her caucus because of bad management, that this holds water. And yet it keeps being perpetuated.
Yeah, including by a premier who is also a woman whose biggest competition is, yet another woman. As a woman, I'm actually kind of, ashamed, embarrassed by Kathleen Wynne's presumption and by Klassen's piece. And I really hope that even Alison Redford is kind of shaking her head at this. Let's be honest, this isn't distraction politics. This is just dumb politics. The reason why
I don't know. I think there's a bit of distraction going on because I think Wynne wants to insulate herself from any criticism of her own horrible record to try and make sure that no one comes after her. Otherwise, well, it's just because she's a woman.
Yeah, no women have, trouble holding on to their private purses, let alone the public purse jokes right now. Look, both Alison Redford and Kathleen Wynne have abysmal records, one far worse than the other, except we're still stuck with her in this province. She has yet to exit. Still waiting for that day, by the way. Yeah. Whereas Alison Redford actually made an exit a lot faster than I ever thought she would. Why? For very good reasons. Don't forget about that $45,000 she racked up in Nelson Mandela funeral costs because she was just too hoity-toity to take the PM's plane with the rest of the premiers, as well as, $16K for her Chicago visit, which, also included $4,000 in fancy receptions and the rest of it. Whereas you look at this province, we've got over $1 billion in squandered scandals and finances from the public purse, but our premier's still sticking around and making up really lame excuses for the premier or ex-premier of Alberta, who, by the way, wasn't conservative, who barely ever, let alone by the end, had the support of her own party and caucus. And it was them who had to tell her, you're embarrassing us. And keep in mind, the whole reason why she even won that leadership race back in 2011 or whatever was because of the fact that she went around her party and not through it.
Well, she signed up thousands of teachers and other members of public sector unions that became two-minute Tories and bought memberships and voted for her.
Yeah, because she promised them $500 million in new spending. Very conservative there, Redford. So look, the point of the matter is she was bad for the province. She was just bad for the brand of PCs going forward. It's good for that they got rid of that dead weight and good for her for exiting before things got any worse.
Look at, and I talked about this a bit in my column on Friday's papers, is that look at their records. For Alberta, economically, compared to Ontario, it's going gangbusters. 4.3% unemployment, 7.5% in Ontario. In terms of participation rate, it's about 66% of the population is in the labor force in Ontario, and it's 73% in Alberta. Why? Because there's that many jobs available. We are a depressed, declining economy here in Ontario, and yet there's polls out just over the weekend showing that Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals could win again. If anyone deserves to be booted right now, it's not Kathy Dunderdale in Newfoundland, who lost the support of her caucus. It's not Alison Redford. It's Kathleen Wynne, but the Ontario Liberals defend her tooth and nail.
Yeah, and it seems as though the media, it doesn't matter how much noise we or colleagues for other outlets make about Kathleen Wynne, because I just don't understand how it's possible to remain on her side right now. It seems that however much noise we're making, folks just aren't getting the hint. I hope that we end up going into a spring election. I hope that I can still feel like a good member of this province, because this province will finally wake up and say, enough is enough. Stop taking my money. I've got a 40% hike in my hydro bill, Brian. I don't know what your family's dealing with over there, but for me, it's not feasible anymore.
So 40% hike in hydro, about to see a spike in gas. That's the one that's not provincially owned, but the hydroelectricity is either municipally or provincially owned. So on top of that, she's going to add a provincial pension plan and a surtax. Apparently, we don't know what the details are on that. So she wants more of our money, and she wants to stick around a lot longer. Final thoughts, 20 seconds to you.
Yeah, well, to quote your column, all of Alison Redford's, shortcomings were less than $1 million in waste, and Kathleen Wynne over $1 billion. So it's nice to see her sticking up for her pal.
Yes. Well, such is politics. Faith, good talking to you as always. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Brian.